The story begins in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where the lawns are neatly trimmed, the mailboxes are identical, and the homeowners association has its fingers in every detail of people's lives. For years, I had put up with the constant nitpicking from the HOA president, a woman we'll just call Karen. She was relentless, enforcing rules that she herself rarely followed, and always ready to find a reason to issue fines. But all of that paled in comparison to the stunt she pulled one evening while I was away. I live with my German Shepherd, a well-trained K9 named Ranger, who had once served alongside me during my time in the military. Ranger wasn't just a pet, he was disciplined, protective, and sharp as a blade. He had guarded me in places far more dangerous than a suburban cul-de-sac, and I trusted him with my life. My home was his territory, and he treated it that way. It all started after a heated meeting where Karen had tried to impose yet another ridiculous rule, this time about homeowners not being allowed to keep large animals on their property. Everyone knew that rule was aimed squarely at me and Ranger. When I refused to comply, her anger was palpable. She threatened action, but I never imagined she would take things this far. A few days later, I had to step out for the evening. It was nothing unusual, just a late dinner with some old friends. Before leaving, I made sure Ranger was fed, the house was secure, and all doors and windows were locked. What I didn't know was that Karen had been watching, waiting for her opportunity to strike. Under the cover of darkness, she marched up to my home with the arrogance of someone who believed she owned the entire neighborhood. Using a spare key she had no doubt obtained through some shady means, perhaps during one of her routine HOA inspections, she let herself into my home. Karen's plan was as petty as it was illegal. She wanted to catch me violating HOA guidelines, take photos, and build some twisted case to force me to remove Ranger or pay fines. She thought she could sneak in, snoop around, and leave without consequence. But what she didn't account for was the fact that my home wasn't empty. Ranger was inside, and Ranger didn't take kindly to intruders. The moment she stepped across the threshold, Ranger's ears perked up. He didn't bark immediately, his training taught him patience and precision. Instead, he stalked the shadows, watching her every move. Karen crept through the living room, flashlight in hand, muttering under her breath about violations and evidence. She pulled out her phone, snapping photos of my furniture, my decor, even Ranger's bed in the corner. That was when Ranger made his presence known. From the darkness, a low growl rolled through the air like thunder. Karen froze, the color draining from her face. Slowly, she turned, and there he was, 90 pounds of muscle, standing tall, teeth bared, and eyes locked on hers. Ranger didn't lunge. He didn't need to. His growl alone was enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. Karen panicked. She tried to backpedal, fumbling for the door, but Ranger cut her off with a swift move, positioning himself between her and the exit. His training kicked in, he wasn't just a guard dog, he was a protector. He didn't attack, but he made it very clear that she wasn't going anywhere without permission. She screamed, but no one came. My house sat on a large corner lot, and her shrieking only carried as far as the end of the street. By the time I returned home, her ordeal had been going on for nearly half an hour. I pulled into the driveway, surprised to see the front door ajar. Immediately on alert, I stepped inside and found the scene laid out before me. Ranger stood firm, still growling, his gaze locked on a trembling Karen who clutched her phone like a lifeline. She stammered excuses, trying to spin a story about an inspection gone wrong, but it was clear what had happened. She had broken into my home, trespassed on my property, and gotten caught by the last guard dog she ever wanted to meet. I called the police without hesitation. When officers arrived, Ranger finally relaxed at my command. Karen, on the other hand, found herself being questioned in the middle of my living room. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming she had authority as HOA president, but the officers weren't buying it. They saw her for what she was, a trespasser. The humiliation didn't end there. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Neighbors who had once feared Karen's wrath now laughed at the story of her being cornered by my K9. The HOA board, embarrassed by her reckless stunt, was forced to hold an emergency meeting. In the end, Karen faced criminal charges for trespassing and unlawful entry, and she was swiftly removed from her position as president. As for Ranger, he became a bit of a local legend. People would stop by on their walks just to see him, the dog who had single-handedly stood up to the most hated HOA president in town. I gave him extra treats that week, proud of him not just for protecting my home, but for showing the neighborhood that sometimes, the best justice doesn't come from a courtroom. Karen's downfall was swift, and her power vanished overnight. She went from barking orders at everyone to being the punchline of every backyard barbecue. Meanwhile, I continued life as usual, Ranger at my side, knowing that no matter what schemes the HOA tried next, they would think twice before ever crossing my doorstep again. In the end, Karen learned a painful lesson. Rules don't make you untouchable, and arrogance doesn't make you invincible. And when you break into someone's home, you'd better be ready for what's waiting inside. Because in my house, that meant facing Ranger, and she'll never forget the night she learned exactly whose home she had stepped into. Do like, subscribe.